I'm a nerd. Let's open with that. And when I was 25, I started playing Australian rules football. Okay. So I was temping for an Australian mining company, and they mined uranium. So I was working for Mr. Burns. So just imagine that. And everyone in this office played Aussie rules football. I had no idea what that was, but I really wanted a job. Temping is terrible. You never know if you're going to have work the next day. The pay is shit. So I thought the best way to secure full-time employment was to take up the office sport. It's flawless logic, really. So I started playing this ridiculous sport. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I asked my coworker, Ash, I was like, what is footy? And he just sent me YouTube clips of dudes taking speckies off each other. So if you've ever seen a gif of one man kneeing another man in the back to get higher and grab a ball, he was like, yeah, you're gonna do that. And I was like, no, I'm not. I never played a sport before in my life, not ever, okay? I was yearbook editor. I was captain of the debate team, high school and university. I was captain of the Smart Ask team. Do we all remember Smart Ask on CBC? Highest ranking Nova Scotian ever. Very proud of myself. I had no idea what I was getting into. But I'm from Nova Scotia. I ethnically identify as Nova Scotian. It never came up until I moved to Toronto, and then people started asking me what I am. And I was like, what kind of question is that? Nova Scotian. We've been there for 350 years. Okay, we were people who were too Scottish for Scotland, so we left. We arrived somewhere that looked exactly like Scotland, only it was colder. And we're like, oh, we'll stay. And then just got angrier and angrier. So this may not immediately come across, but I'm an inherently violent and angry person. So I took to Aussie rules football really well. And even though I didn't get offered a full-time job at the uranium mining company, Mr. Burns wanted someone who would be fully dedicated to the office administration of uranium mining for the rest of their life. And ooh, that's not me. So I didn't stay on there, but I did keep going with the footy. It's just, if you still don't know what I'm talking about, it's just a weird sport. Just imagine a sport that Australians came up with. It's a giant oval field. There are 18 players per side, so that's 36 people on the field at all times. It is spacious. Okay, there's still a lot of room, and you're just knocking people over and kicking a ball. That's about it. So I kept playing Aussie rules even though I didn't get the job, and I kept playing to the point where I got real good at it, and I made Team Canada, which was not a thing that should ever happen. Again, president of the Crystal Growing Club. This was not a place I belonged. But, hey, Team Canada, isn't that all we ever want? Like you're watching the Olympics, and even though you have not an athletic bone in your body at all, you're just like, oh, I just want to be at the top of the ski jump with the maple leaf on my chest, And this was my opportunity, only with a dumb sport. So I went and I played for Team Canada. I went to World Championships in 2014, and it was good. My team, I was a B team. Let's make that super clear, okay? I was good, wasn't that good? I was on the B team. We placed 4th in the world, which was not half bad. The other Canadian women's team, they're world champions. Good for them. But me, 4th in the world, and it was great. And then we had something called Silly Sunday, which is just, it's the Sunday after a tournament or a season ends where you get silly drunk. And at this party, I was sexually assaulted. Now, the man who assaulted me, he was not a footy player, but he was told to do it with some really disturbing graphic language that I'm not going to share with you, by someone who did play for Team Canada, and actually still does play for Team Canada. He thought it would be funny. He thought it would be really funny if this man raped me. And when that happened, he jumped me from behind 3 other guys who played for Team Canada and still play for Team Canada. They laughed and clapped and cheered because I was the boring feminist on the team, and I was finally getting what was coming to me. So I broke my attacker's ribs because I'm an angry Nova Scotian football player, and I didn't appreciate what was happening to me. And I had that man arrested and convicted and banned from Australia for 10 years. But thank you. It's a Cinderella story sexual assault, really, if we're gonna... It doesn't happen. You don't get a conviction. Oh my God. I got one. But those 4 men that were complicit in my assault, they still play footy. Now, I'll never play footy ever again in my life because I value myself more than I value a sport. Thank you. We all should. Nothing is more important than yourself. I know that sounds really selfish, but yeah, no, be selfish. Don't let other people fuck with you. They still play. And I fought for a year and a half to get these men punished or reprimanded or fined or something. And AFL Canada did nothing. They did an 18-month investigation where I was never actually interviewed about what happened to me because the president of AFL Canada he tried to call me once. It was while I was in a plane flying back from Australia, and he said I refused his call because I was a mile over the Pacific. Now, we waited 18 more months for other people to be interviewed because, and the reason provided to me was that they didn't want to be. But they had attempted to contact me, so that was fine. Anyway, at the end of their investigation, they said that no wrongdoing, there was no evidence of any wrongdoing from any AFL Canada members, so no action would be taken. Have I mentioned I'm a very angry person? So I was like, what do I do? What do I do now? How do I keep fighting? What platform do I have? Well, I tell stories. I'm going to tell my goddamn story. I will go to the motherland. I will talk to the mothership. I will talk to AFL in Australia. I will do Fringe World in Perth. I will do the second largest fringe in the world. I'll do Adelaide Fringe, and I will have blood in the streets. Good Lord. Australia will not stand for this kind of behavior in their sport. Turns out I'm not the only woman in AFL to ever be sexually assaulted. I went to Australia and I talked to AFL and I said, this is what happened to me. And I was speaking to the Vice President of Corporate Affairs and Integrity. And she said, what'll it take to get you playing footy again? You're the kind of woman we want playing footy. I will get you a public apology. We will pay for your tour. We'll do whatever it takes. And then they did nothing. And so I was just feeling abandoned all over again. The phone calls stopped being returned, my emails stopped being returned, and by the time I made it to the Adelaide Fringe on my own dime, the last email I got was, if you make it to Melbourne, please drop by AFL House. It'd be great to match a face to the emails. And the Adelaide Fringe, Jesus Christ. Well, sorry my language, but fuck the Adelaide Fringe. Oh my God. I was doing two shows. I was doing my show Drag Queen Stole My Dress, which is about how I called off my wedding. Fan favorite. I wear a wedding dress, doesn't fit. I chug beer on stage. It's hilarious. People loved that show in Adelaide. Thank God they loved something. Get Around Me, which was my show about footy and my sexual assault. Not so much. Turns out Adelaide did not want to hear about some of the horrible things happening in what is essentially their national religion. And when I would tell people, they're like, what, you think you're the only one? You're not special. I was like, I'm aware, but Jesus Christ, that is not the response you should have to that story. And I would try to flyer in the streets, and I would just get, oh, women can't play footy, and is there tits in it? Show your tits. And people would come at me. And I realized at that festival that I have a finite amount of energy. I have a finite amount of tolerance and patience. And I actually can hit a wall where I just can't anymore. And my ticket sales were really low. And I realized I was going to have to cancel Get Around Me. And that was the whole reason I had come to that country to do that show. And I had failed. I'd failed myself, I'd failed my sport, I'd failed women. And I was having lunch with my friend crying over my cheeseburger because I was like, what am I doing? Why did I think this would be a good idea? Why? Just why? And I get an email, my phone dings, and I look, and Drag Queen Stole My Dress is won Best Comedy at the Adelaide Fringe. So I start crying even harder. And the server sees me upset, and she comes over, she's like, is everything okay? I'm like, I want an award! She's like, isn't that a good thing? I don't know, is it? I don't know what life is anymore. It was horrible, but I'm sure it's great to win things, I suppose. So I canceled my show that night. I won my award, which was a bottle of champagne that they gave me cold, so I drank that. And then I just put on Drag Queen Stole My Dress for the whole rest of the festival because at that point I just needed to sell some tickets. And then after that festival ended, I went to Melbourne. Now, Melbourne was where I was assaulted. Melbourne was where I was going to make my stand. Melbourne is the home of footy. That is where I was going to make the most difference. Everyone said, screw Adelaide. Adelaide's a backwater bogan town full of hillbillies. Melbourne is where people will actually listen to you. So I do both my shows in Melbourne. I do Drag Queen Stole My Dress the first night, sold out. There's randoms there. It's amazing, spectacular, wonderful. Who gives a shit? The next night, I go to do Get Around Me. No pre-sales. There's nothing. And I start to cry again. I cried a lot on tour. Just bawling. And my friend, the same one who was there when I sobbed over my cheeseburger, she's like, just do your show anyway. I will come. And I was like, you've seen it 4 times already. And she's like, I'm going to see it a 5th. Okay? Just do it again. Don't cancel. And before I went on stage, I called the Vice President of Corporate Affairs and Integrity at AFL, and I left her the most verbally abusive voicemail I've ever left anybody. And I felt real bad, but not bad enough to not do it. So I was just like, look, you said you would do all these things for me. You didn't do anything. You didn't sponsor my tour. You didn't get any kind of discipline for the men who assaulted me. They still play football. You didn't come to Perth. You didn't come to Adelaide. You have done nothing. You have been nothing but the most monumental disappointment to women and the dismantling the patriarchy ever. My show is on tonight at 8:30 at the Butterfly Club. You said you wanted to hear my story. My show is my story. If you can't afford the ticket price, I'll put you on the comp list. And I hung up, and my friend was like, there is no way in hell that woman is showing up now. And I was like, well, I don't care. She wasn't going to come anyway. So I'm doing the show. And I know every single person in the audience, because there were 8 people, except for one. There's one woman there who I'm sure is the reviewer from the Australian Times who had said that they would be there that night. And I made it to the end of my show. I did the show. And because I'm a fringe performer, even when it's not a fringe, I always do a little speech at the end of my show. And I finished my show and I went to start, and I tried to say that my whole tour had been an exercise in trauma recovery that hadn't worked. Because I had failed. And it was in, like, the sheer emotion of being back in that place and doing that show and not getting anything I wanted was soul crushing. And I started crying. And I tried to make it through my speech, and it got a little bit more intense, and I ended up like heave sobbing, like ugly crying, deep, like guttural sobs. It was not a career highlight. It wasn't professional. And I ended up having to run off stage and like fall over sobbing in my dressing room, and my best friend had to come and like pick me up and teach me how to breathe again. And I managed to get myself back together enough to go out and be like, I made buttons, does anybody want to buy buttons? It's just me giving the finger to the patriarchy. Which are my buttons, I sell them, painstakingly handmade. And the one woman I didn't know, she was standing there waiting, and I was like, oh God, it's a reviewer from the Australian Times. What kind of friggin' review am I gonna get? And so I look at her, I'm like, I am so sorry. I know you're a reviewer. I swear to God, I'm a professional. This is harder than I thought it would be. And I should back up, because I missed a thing. During the show, I singled that poor woman out again. Because at the show, I'm like, you know, AFL Canada abandoned me, AFL abandoned me, and I looked at her and I was like, unless your name is Elizabeth Lucan, they're not here. Should have told that earlier, and sorry, it's fine. So I look at her, I'm like, I swear I'm a professional, and she's like, actually, my name is Elizabeth Lucan, and I really need to talk to you. So I was like, well, you can wait, because I have to finish crying. So I composed myself, and I went to have a conversation with Ms. Lucan. And she had thought she could help me, but it turns out that she couldn't. She tried her best, but there was nothing she could do for me. But I had made such a fuss, such a very loud noise all over the world in the last 18 months about what had happened to me, that it turns out the AFL couldn't ignore it anymore. And not just me, all those other women, 'cause remember, I'm not special, who were also sexually assaulted by AFL members, they were making a pretty big noise too. So because of what we had done, the AFL had actually launched an external human rights investigation into the entirety of all of its programs. Professional programs, club and country programs, international programs, everything. How they deal with women, how they handle the complaints as they come in so they don't compound the trauma again. The entirety of AFL is being investigated by a human rights commission. And I was like, oh, did I just win? Yeah, so there's that. Sometimes you can feel like you failed utterly and they give you a cold bottle of champagne. And sometimes you can really feel like you've wasted your life and you get a human rights investigation into the world's most patriarchal sport. So don't give up. Thank you.
Oh my God, keep that